All right. So aloha. This is the key terms video for chapter 4 of IT 480. So some of the key terms that you need to be aware of for this chapter, there's quite a few actually. And essentially the approach that we begin now with chapter 4 and beyond is we start looking at the different layers of the OSI model. So this chapter, we're going to look mostly at the physical layer, but there is some introduction also to the data link layer. And So the things associated with the physical layer, that's predominantly the topic of things in this chapter. So you should understand what are the advantages and the disadvantages, the pros and the cons, as well as the limitations of Wi-Fi and physical connections, as well as the different types of physical connections. So what I mean by that are like the different media types. What kinds of cables do you use when you're using physical connections? For Wi-Fi, we're dealing with radio waves that's being broadcasted, and there's only, in the context of Wi-Fi, there's only one type of radio waves that we're going to be using, although they can be on different frequencies, which is why we have, of course, the 2.4 gigahertz and the 5 gigahertz and different things there. But for the physical aspect of it, you should understand what are the differences and what are the limitations, what are the benefits or drawbacks of Cat5 and Cat6 cables. And in context of those types of cables, those Ethernet cables, copper cables, you should understand what are STP, shielded twisted pair, and UTP, unshielded twisted pair. And again, the drawbacks and the benefits of some versus the other. Fiber optic cables and coaxial cables, rollover cables, crossover cables, and straight through cables. So again, that's all related to this idea of at the physical layer of the media. How do you actually connect two or more devices together? You should understand the PDU. Remember the datagram units. The data units. So what is the terminology? The word frame that we associate there with our physical layer and our data link. So what does that mean? And the frame addressing and headers and understanding how that works, the encoding associated with frames. You should distinguish between the terms bandwidth and throughput. We often hear them used interchangeably, but they're not. They actually mean two different things. So you should understand what those differences are. In context of a network, I wrote down in my notes content management, but that's not what I meant to write. Contention management. So when you have devices that are kind of conflicting, they both want to talk at the same time or something, how do you manage that in a network? Media access control, your MAC address, what it is and what it's used for, and why is that important? Duplex types. So you should understand both full and half duplex, as well as auto negotiation, and know what those terms mean. And lastly, physical network topologies. So when you have physical devices, 5 or 6, 10 laptops, a classroom of 30 machines and computers, how do you connect them? How do you network them together? And there's a variety of different types of physical topologies or design considerations. There's mesh, there's partial mesh, there's ring, there's bus, there's extended bus, there's what else? Star. There's just a number of different ways that you could lay them out, and you should understand what those different types of networks, physical network topologies, what those are, and again, what are the drawbacks and the disadvantages of some and the limitations. So those are the terms and kind of the ideas, the concepts for this week, and we'll see you next week. Aloha.